Hey everybody, DM Gallibond here, and it's last week from the table for March 9th, 2021, where we talk about what happened in the 3 actual play sessions that I run every week. Let's get right into it. Alright, so on Thursday night with the Sword Coast Chronicles, the party is getting close to finishing up their time in Gracklestug. And I'm going to go ahead and get out of here so that you can see everything that they were up to during the session. Alright, so they are still in the city and they are still visiting the home of the Stonespeaker, Stonespeaker Hagram. They had just finished their conversation with the Seneschal of the King, and they had made their contingency plans. They were going to separate the king from the consort during the concert that Falliger is playing. The friend of the king, an abjurer of some potent power, is going to cast True Seeing on the king to hopefully reveal to the king that the consort is actually not what she seems. And depending on the king's reaction, they had their contingencies in place. If the king seemed shocked and horrified to see that his consort was not in fact a lovely Duergar, but some sort of conniving demon, then they would act one way. If the king, on the other hand, didn't bat an eye at all or reacted poorly, well, then they had another contingency of what they were going to do. So they were getting ready to go when they made the mistake of asking the Stonespeaker about the language and the music of the stones. And so the Stonespeaker, they discovered that he likes to talk. He said, first of all, it takes a very long time to learn the language of the stones. When he was an apprentice, he had to lay on his left side for 25 years, keeping his ear pressed to the stone without moving for all of those 25 years, just to learn how to listen to the language of the stone with his left ear. Then at the end of that time, he had to roll over and keep his right ear pressed to the stone for another 25 years to try to learn the language of the stones through his right ear. And then he started to elaborate on how every type of rock has a different language. So you have the language of the granite, of course, and then you have the language of the marble, and then you have the language of the basalt. But he said perhaps the most interesting language of all, and the most interesting music, comes from the stones that are round. Because while the language is kind of complex with the round stones, there is absolutely nothing in the Stonespeaker's opinion that can compare with the music of those rolling stones. Alright, so they finally tore themselves away from the Stonespeaker and had to rush back to the palace and get ready for the banquet that night. And they had been alerted that the king was going to be serving delicacies in honor of his ambassadors from the surface, or his guests from the surface world, because they discovered that when they got to this banquet, it started with a cold gazpacho-like soup, and then there was a salad of leafy vegetables, then there was some fresh baked bread, and then they started to bring out the roasts. And there was roasted beef, and there was roasted turkey, and there was roasted pork. Then they also served all of that with a medley of steamed and roasted and fresh surface vegetables. And then they brought out dessert, and the dessert was this delectable dairy concoction, sweetened, frozen, and scooped out and served up on plates. And that was a wonderful, wonderful feast. And that is where we had to take our break for the session. Now, I haven't gone back and listened to the session yet at this point. I'll have to say we were having all kinds of trouble with the Discord, and we actually had to stop the recording and restart the recording at the end of the break. All right, so after dinner, they went to the big hall where the concert was going to be. And the concert was held in this large hall, and they had set aside this space with the elaborate gold inlaid mosaic on the floor as the place where the musicians would perform, because that has the best acoustics in the entire castle. There were several dignitaries that were in attendance. Now, one of those dignitaries was actually Craftsman Meldrum. That's the one that they had talked to earlier in the day, and Thaldor had used his influence to make sure that Craftsman Meldrum had been invited to the concert. Now, also coming to the concert, of course, was Abjur Haldher. That is the friend of the Seneschal, who is to play a pivotal role at the precise point in the concert when they are going to give true seeing to the king and allow him to allow his eyes to behold Shawl in her true form. All right, and of course, also in attendance, command performance, naturally, King Steel Shadow himself, and his consort, Shawl, in her Duergar form. All right, so then they came along to the precise point in the concert, and when Falazur brought the king up to play, and they got to the height of the song, Abjur Haldher reached out and cast True Seeing on King Steel Shadow, and that revealed Shawl in her succubus form. And the king did in fact and seemed very shocked and taken aback when that happened, which told the party that he had been deceived, and they immediately put their plan into attack, which was to yell out "demon" and begin to send some of the summoned animals that Mulek had from his bag of tricks to attack the succubus. And the succubus did, in fact, drop her disguise and reveal to everybody her true form. And she also raised her hands high and she called out, "My lord comes, he arises!" And as she did, the entire palace began to shake. And as it shook, there were screams from up in the balcony, and there were cracks that started to appear in the floor, especially near these big braziers that were burning and providing light here in the hall. And out of those braziers, there stepped 4 demons, Babao demons, to be precise. And then also out of some cracks in the floor in the main hall where most of the guards are, there stepped 4 Rudderkin, which is another type of very hideous looking demon that began attacking some of the special invited guests that were down on the floor. But the people in the balcony were not safe either, because up in the balcony, a number of maw demons jumped out, and they just began attacking all of the other folk that had been invited to the concert. So the party began fighting down here on the main level. Abjur Haldher, with his first action, he actually banished the succubus, and she failed her saving throw. So she is temporarily being held in a in a harmless demi-plane somewhere. And of course, if his concentration gets broken, or if he ends his concentration at the king's command or somebody else's command, she can come back. If he manages to hold his concentration for a full minute, then she will just be banished back to the abyss permanently until some other thing draws her to the natural world again. And of course, presumably by that time, the charm can be broken on the king by magical or normal means, just by him making a save. But the party focused their attacks on the Babao. The guards immediately surrounded the king to protect him, and then several of the other guards that were outside the hall and up in the balcony, they started flooding in to fight the other demons, the Redderkin and the Maw demons. Then at the end of the session, and we're still in the middle of the fight, but we had to call the session because of time. At the end of the fight, another guard rushed into the hall and shouted out, "The city is in danger. Something is emerging from the Dark Lake." And this goes back to something that the Stonespeaker had told them last week in his visions, which was something about a two-headed Leviathan that would rise from the water and pose a danger to everybody. So you'll have to tune in Thursday night, 8 p.m., find out what all of this is about, and find out what's going to happen next on the Sword Coast Chronicles. And you can join us 8 p.m. Eastern Time over at twitch.tv/Gallibond. We hope that you will be there. All right, so on Saturday night, we played through the Lost Mine of Original D&D game, and that game happens 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time over on the Twitch channel. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way here so you can see what happened in this particular session. Okay, so we were still in Wave Echo Cave here, and last week the party had come up with an elaborate plan whereby they could get a narrow wagon with the green slime down into the pit. And they were supposed to have it guided by goblins. And then following those would be other goblins with a barrel that was half filled with flammable oil and half filled with goblin poo that would cause a noxious smoke and would drive the green slime deeper into the dungeon. Well, at least that was the plan. So they started by trying to roll the wagon down this slope here. However, one of the goblins failed its dex check, and instead of steering the wagon straight, they steered it into the side of the wall. So they had to get the wagon righted, and then they had to go ahead and drive it the rest of the way. And they had to take 2 or 3 attempts to safely jump off before the wagon crashed into the ravine there. I did give them 2 chances to do that, and all of them made their dex check on the second chance. So none of them went with the wagon and the green slime sarcophagus into the bottom of that pit. But as the wagon went by there, the goblins noticed the remains of an encampment over here by this big pillar. And that encampment included the body of a dead dwarf, which was one of Gundren Rockseeker's brothers, Tharden. And so then the next thing coming along was the goblins with the barrel of oil. They eventually threw that over the side and then got it lit on fire. So now the wagon, the poo, and as it turns out, the green slime were all burning. So they eventually burned up the green slime and burned up the wagon. And as it turned out, there weren't any enemies down in that chasm, so they really didn't need to go through that whole elaborate Rube Goldberg plan. But I wasn't about to tell them that because I was having so much fun with them deciding how they were going to do that, and it actually worked, but they just didn't need it. So, kudos to the party for coming up with an ingenious way of getting rid of their several problems. All right, so they went in and they searched the camp. They got some supplies. They figured out which brother it was. They left a few people behind to guard the body, and then the rest of them decided they were going to go and continue exploring. So they had a choice of going either up to the northwest or to the east. They decided to go to the east, and Sermos led the way as the dwarf who has low light vision. He went towards this big chamber that has several passages coming off of it, and as he got there, he noticed that there were a bunch of skeletons on the ground, and he sat there and looked for a bit, and he said, well, he didn't think they were animated skeletons, so he crept in to try to figure out what was going on. And as he crept in there, he discovered what had turned them into skeletons, because there were a whole flock of sturges that were camped out on the roof of this cavern. They all descended on him and everybody else that went running in, and they started attacking everybody. So there were sturges attacking the PCs, there were sturges attacking the goblins, there were sturges attacking the bugbears, there were sturges attacking the wolf, and it was just a big mess. But eventually the party prevailed and got all of the sturges killed. And then Sermos crept a little bit further to the east because he noticed that there was a strange green glow coming from in there, and he went far enough to realize that the glow is coming from a whole bunch of fungus that appears to be growing in here. But meanwhile, the rest of the party had been looking north and south, and Theolus said, hey, there's a door to the north. So they all decided to go up north towards this door. And as they went north towards the door, he listened at the door, didn't hear anything. He tested the door. He didn't think it was locked. And then when everybody else got there, he went ahead and he pulled open the door. And inside, he found more skeletal remains. But this time, he found something feeding on the skeletal remains. And actually, it was three ghouls that were feeding on the skeletal remains in that room. And then this is where Conrad really came into his own. He jumped up behind Theolus, but not before two of the ghouls had attacked Theolus. And in this edition, the attack of the ghouls, every attack of the ghouls has a chance to cause paralysis, the bite and the claws. And Theolus missed at least one of the saving throws from the 5 attacks that he took. So he had to make 5 saving throws, missed at least one of them. And then he was going to be paralyzed for 20 minutes. And in this edition of the game, that paralysis doesn't wear off when you take more damage. You are just simply paralyzed and helpless for 20 minutes, regardless of what your enemies do to you. So the gnolls could have kept attacking him and biting him and everything. But Conrad stepped up, and as a cleric of Helm, he used his ability to turn the undead. And he was successful in turning 10 hit dice of undead. And there were 3 ghouls, only 2 hit dice each. So they all went running as fast as they could all the way up to the northern corner of the room. And when they did, that's another thing. In this edition, if you turn a creature, as long as the cleric doesn't attack that creature, the creature stays turned. So that meant that the goblins and the bugbears all went chasing after the ghouls and ran up to the northern part of the room and hacked the ghouls to bits. And the fight was easily won. Now, they had the option of waiting for the paralysis on Theolis to wear off, or they could use a healing potion, because in this edition, healing potion will have one of two effects. It will either cure 1d6 plus 1 points of damage, or it will cure paralysis. So they fed Theolis a healing potion to get rid of his paralysis. Then he drank another healing potion in order to give himself some hit points back. And that was where we ran out of time for the session. So join us next week. What we will start with is we will start by examining this this room here and seeing what the party are able to find, sort of what loot may be in this room, and then we will continue on with the adventure from there. But that will be next week on Lost Mine of Original D&D. Join us. It'll be a great time. All right, everybody. So then Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m., we were playing our 88th session of the Walker of Waterdeep. And the party is still in Kamigawa, but they're kind of close to wrapping up everything that they are going to do there. And of course, as you will recall, the party are still in this big temple, the Shrine of Myojin, where they are looking to complete the wedding. And of course, the royal wedding that they are trying to perform is the wedding between Kyodai, the daughter of Okagachi, and Princess Mashiko, the daughter of Lord Kanda. And so Adamant, as the ordained cleric of Moradin, he was tasked with actually performing the vows, while the rest of the party was engaged in a skills challenge to sort of delay and prevent anybody from breaking into the shrine until the ceremony could be completed. So, Adamant did a wedding in the style of Moradin, which meant that for rings, he took copper pieces, silver pieces, electrum pieces, gold pieces, and platinum pieces, and he forged those into rings that have bands of each of the metal in the rings. And as he was forging those using some of his features of the Forge Cleric, he was explaining to the brides-to-be how each metal had significance in the relationship that they were entering into and the bond that they were making, and how each one was sacred to Moradin in a different way. And so the brides were dutifully listening to all of this and figuring out what this meant. And then he had them exchange rings and take their vows. And ultimately, the skills challenge was successful in holding off intruders until the two could be married in the sight of the god of the forge, and their marriage bond was finished. Now, because they succeeded in the skills challenge, the fact that the two got married meant that the party got advantage for the next hour on all saving throws against spells and spell-like effects, which was important. Because as soon as the ceremony was complete, you guessed it, Lord Kanda broke in, and he wasn't very happy about the fact that his prized possession was, in air quotes, gone, but was now actually Kyodai in human form instead of this item that he had, that which was stolen. Of course, Lord Kanda wasn't alone. He had 12 of his palace guards with him. Now, These palace guards, most of these other art are out of the Kamigawa release block, but I actually found the palace guard as artwork called Samurai by the artist G-Brush over on the DeviantArt site. So go check out that site. There's lots of tons of great artwork over there that you can find. All right, now he pulled out an ivory-tipped cane, which was a rod of rulership in disguise, and he ordered everybody in the party, commanded everybody in the party, as well as his own daughter and Coyote, to obey him. Because of the advantage that they got, the vast majority of people succeeded in their saving throw. And when they did, they all saw that the palace guard was merely an illusion, and they were not guards, but it was a bunch of Painracker Oni, which is a kind of demon there in Kamigawa. And so Lord Kanda ordered the Oni to attack, and there was a big battle. Now, turns out that both Princess Mashiko and Coyote have some psionic abilities, and they were kind of able, Coyote especially, was able to actually charm Lord Kanda. He failed his saving throw against her charm effect. And so she told him to have the guards stand down. And the Oni, they're like, no, we're going to keep attacking. So Lord Kanda actually then used one of his other abilities, and he summoned another demon, a Hezru, which he commanded to attack the Painracker Oni. So there was this whole big huge battle going on. The party was fighting the Oni. Lord Kanda was sort of trying to get the Oni to stop attacking the party. Princess Mashiko was fighting the Oni, and the general, and he was fighting the Oni, and the Hezru was also fighting the Oni. And so eventually, when the Oni were all defeated, Lord Kanda dismissed the Hezru, and he left. But that still didn't change the fact that Lord Kanda is responsible for 20 years of horrible war. So Princess Mashiko actually had him taken into custody when real palace guards arrived. And they took him, put him in the dungeons, and he's awaiting trial now. So the way we ended our session is that the party had a chance to go and rest as guests in the palace. And this is a view of the city. This artwork was created for us by Heather Arguni, who plays Inka Yelka in the party. And this shows kind of a vision of Eiganja, or Aigon City, as a city under siege. So you can see that in parts of it there are these big craters where parts of the city have been damaged, and then along the walls you can see where there's refugees that have put up tents. And you can also see down in the south here, which is just north of the south gate of the city, there's a big tent city where a bunch of refugees from outlying villages and farms and people who've been displaced from the neighborhoods that have been destroyed by the fighting, where they are living. So this is definitely a city that's showing the scars of war. The party is getting ready to go out into the city and see what they can do to help, but we kind of ran out of time because of that big long battle that was happening. And so we're going to pick up next week with them exploring some of the city, talking to some of the locals, going back and talking with the princess and Coyote, who have offered aid to the party to see how they can what they can do maybe to assist with their mission that the party has here in Kamigawa. But now this was a big piece of kind of getting closer to being able to finish their actual mission that they came here to do. But they still have to go and deal with Ryusei, the falling star, who is, of course, that particular guardian spirit dragon that has been corrupted. And so they're going to go see if they can take care of that next. If you want to find out what happens, you can join us next Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And also remember, this coming Sunday, the 14th, that's when the time changes if you're here in the U.S. And you're not in, Arizona and Indiana that don't observe the change from standard time to daylight savings time. But if you're in an area that observes that time change, then the time will change, and we will be playing the game 2 p.m. Eastern Time one Sunday afternoon. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for this week. I'm going to go ahead and leave you with more of the dulcet tones of Stream Beats. Hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back next week and join us for another edition of Last Week from the Table. And meanwhile, check out all the other great videos we have over here on YouTube, and go check out our Twitch channel and join us for some of these live streams that we will have coming up. And as always, I'll remind you to make your games memorable so that you have tales that you can share from your table as well. Good night, everybody.